Hello, and welcome to the first ever episode of my new Symposium Podcast. My name is Quinoa, also known as Kirk, and I'm excited to be sharing this new podcast with you. These podcasts will be philosophical discussions, sitting in a circle, in which everybody listens to each other, patiently and attentively. It's in the Native American tradition of the listening circle, in which only one person holds the talking stick and everyone else listens. And when they're completely finished, they pass the talking stick on, and in this way everybody gets their voice heard, even if they're quiet. Some people might say that philosophy is boring or pointless. Why think about things when you can just live life courageously? Personally, I think about things anyway. That is my nature. And it is fulfilling to share and be present for the sharing of others. Also, our current cultural models do not help us navigate life, and we need to reconsider everything. The point is not to reach conclusions that we can be certain about, but to air our thoughts and speculations, to learn good, clear thinking, to communicate with clarity and precision, and to listen to each other. I chose death as a subject for the first episode because I felt there would be a spectrum of different perspectives without divisive opinions. It is a subject of which we are ignorant, but possess strong intuitions. I'm very curious about what people have to say about death, not just as the end of life, but as the context of life, and therefore how to live. Please feel free to contact me via Facebook if you have any response or any questions or any suggestions for a discussion topic, and if you would like to make a financial contribution to help pay for the costs of this podcast so I can continue to offer it for free, please do so via the PayPal link. Thank you and enjoy listening. Lots of love to you out there in the world in different places and different times. Yeah, the format was kind of inspired by reading Plato's Symposium, in which it's just a whole lot of old Greek philosophers sitting around eating and drinking, and then one of them decides to discuss love and what love is. And so they all go around, and they're all philosophers just hanging out together, and they all go around and have an opportunity to give their perspective on what they feel love is. And
must be fun.
Different perspectives. So I've always wanted to do a similar thing, and I always like having good discussions. And I thought about many topics, and I like the idea of people having very different perspectives, something which we all can feel very deeply and think about a lot, but come to some very different conclusions. So I thought death was a good subject, something that I've thought a lot about. Yeah, I thought the first round maybe we could all, if we've got some idea that we've been playing with throughout our life, something that we've been reading about or thinking about or developing in the first round, we can all just take a moment to fully share our own perspective, and then we'll do that in one round, and then the next rounds we can kind of respond to each other's different perspectives and have more of a discussion, but still continue to pass the stick. So, death. Yeah, over a decade ago, my mother died, and this dramatically changed my perspective on death in a very unexpected way. And my mother committed suicide. and this affected me very, very in a very big way. I was very close to her, and loved her more than anyone on this planet. I was surprised to find that I was comforted to some degree by the fact that she chose her own death, and that it was not something that happened to her, but it was something that she decided to do and that she created. And that surprised me that I felt that way. It wasn't really a thought or an idea or something that was true or not true. It was just something which was clear to me, and it turned out to be the best and worst thing that happened to me, my mother's death. It totally rocked my world and destroyed my foundations, and caused me to re-examine everything in the world and everything in my life, and forced me to transform into a larger person, a more self-determined person. And subsequently I can't really understand or relate to our cultural perspective on death. Like, our culture has a very strange approach to death, which can be summed up as death is bad and must be avoided at all costs. Like, we even have a huge medical system, the primary purpose of which is to stop death, and because that's not possible, to at least withhold it for as long as possible. And I can't really relate to the idea that death is a bad thing. Death is inevitable. And when you look at plants, how they're constantly growing and dropping leaves and dropping their seeds and then dying and enriching the soil, and you can see that death is a beautiful process and absolutely essential to life. And throughout my childhood, even though I was raised up as a Christian in a sort of wishy-washy, inoffensive way, not like a Catholic, that didn't really get a Catholic education that I was traumatized by. Just kind of got a soft and fluffy Christianity which didn't really have much of an effect on me. But I still visualized, without really thinking about whether it was true or not, or whether it correlated with Christianity, I always just imagined reincarnation and being reborn into new lives. And I never really believed in it, but one day my dad asked me if I believe in reincarnation, and I said, "Oh, I don't really believe in things." And he said, "Oh yeah, but isn't it obvious?" And it kind of made sense to me that I was describing it last night at the fire, actually, imagining to imagine reincarnation I have to first imagine incarnation. And sometimes I feel into that, like the strangeness of being in a body. And I can sense that I'm beyond this body, but also that I'm fully present in this body. And I imagined it like a veil, and a veil that you can pass through, and you become, as you pass through that veil, you find this form and become fully embedded in that form and forget everything outside of that form.
Right.
Welcome. And then and that's like an incarnation. It's like a passing through this veil into this smaller world, and then we just come back out again, back into this larger form. I also imagined it like being in a womb, like a baby in a womb is in a world that's complete and contains them and sustains them fully. And they may be vaguely aware that there's actually a huge universe all around them that they're just their world is just right in the middle of, and that there's this very thin veil of their mother's flesh that separates them from this world, which is, like, in comparison to the womb, is basically infinite. And I kind of feel the same about this life and this incarnation, that there's the thinnest veil between this world and then a world which might as well be infinite in comparison. It's so much huger. And sometimes for that reason it feels strange to be in a body. It feels strange to be in such a limited form, when I can feel into my existence in this far vaster world. We have hints of this. Like, there's subtle hints, but there's very obvious hints too, like dreams, psychedelic experiences, where we become very aware that there's larger worlds. Like if you smoke DMT, and within seconds you're suddenly aware that there's all of these other dimensions that are right beside us, that are not far away, that all just like layers all around us. So I'd kind of see death as just passing out of the temporal form, out of time, out of space. And I had a vision one day of when I was sitting in a room with some people, just sitting on a beanbag, and I fell asleep just for a second. Just one of those sleeps which is woken up by the nodding of my head. And in that 1 second sleep I had this dream, which was an entire theory of dreams, which just kind of received in an instant. And it was the idea that when we enter into the dream state, I think dreams are many things, but one of the things that dreams are is when we enter into the dream state, we enter into a higher form of consciousness in which we can see different possibilities, all the different possibilities simultaneously, all the parallel worlds, and we can look at each different world like their own little parallel universes, and we can choose which one we want to wake up into. And then when we wake up, we've woken up into the world that we've chosen to wake up into. All of our memories download so it feels like a continuous world. And that kind of imagines reincarnation as a daily process, and also suggests that our lives and the universe is conscious, voluntary, intended, and chosen to the utmost. That it's absolutely our choice, and we're fully willing, fully in control of our world and our life, even when our awareness is limited and there's huge areas that that we've forgotten temporarily. Does that all make sense? Mm-hmm. That's kind of my visualization of it.
It was a while ago, but I thought of some correlation. I can't even remember what the fact was that I was told. I think it's like 27 days or something into a woman's pregnancy, or maybe after the birthing process, the baby, I don't know, becomes conscious or something, or gets a personality. And then there was this other thing which was maybe like DMT being released at the time of birth as well for about the same amount of time. And these are just numbers that I'm just making up because I can't remember what it was. But I had the same idea of like a downloading process of like a personality or something. And it was just like a correlation. And then in Buddhist philosophy, they also say that after death you're in the bardo, which is the intermediate stage between death and rebirth, for so many days. And I think that was the same amount of days, this other thing. So that was interesting, that number kept popping up. So yeah, I thought it was like kind of a life being downloaded into a body. That's how I looked at it. Anyway, yeah, I haven't had much contact with death. Like, my granddad died and I wasn't very close to him, and I think I was more upset when my dog died. Even though my granddad was like really great, I think I was just, at a young age, I was a bit cut off from receiving emotions or just receiving love from people and like noticing it, though I notice it now. I think in my eyes, like that's what a ghost is to me, is like feeling the presence of like someone that was close to you and died, and kind of like walking in their footsteps in a way and feeling like they're watching over you. And then I think the other main experiences of death I've had is like going through a breakup. I think just grieving at just pretty much losing a big part of yourself. Yeah. There's one question that I've always wondered about reincarnation, which is like why it would follow a linear timeline, like a linear, like your next birth would be in the same year or the following day as your death, because I feel like if the soul can't be measured, it means that it's beyond space and time, in a way. So I don't really understand why it would choose to follow the time as we perceive it. That's what I've always wondered, is like why it would choose to go the next day in human days, or the next year in human years, and why I would choose to be on Earth or anywhere, or even as a human, because like I feel that it would just be so powerful. If it can't be measured, it's not like restricted by the speed of light, and therefore like it's kind of boundless. So that's like, I've always questioned reincarnation, I guess in the Buddhist sense. So if anybody has any ideas about that, I'd love to hear.
Have you?
Yeah, so death is a subject for me that I've spent a lot of time sort of dwelling in and thinking about from lots of different perspectives throughout my life. looking from different places from where I've been at the time. Maybe I could start from sort of the early perspective, because I don't think my current one will make much sense without the bits that lead up to it. So like you, Quinoa, I was sort of raised in sort of like a pseudo-Christian, laid-back kind of not really belief system, but implied hints of what happens after this form passes, you know. Nothing concrete, nothing actually talked about or gone into deeply. Like any kid, I didn't really think about it. It wasn't really part of my life to think about that up until a point when I was quite young, and a dog that I really loved more than anything sort of got hit by a car one day and was suddenly gone, you know. And I started to just think about like that situation, what had happened, what is this strange thing that people seem to be so afraid of that is causing me so much pain at the moment, you know. The missing of that creature. It made me question sort of the implanted Christian beliefs of like heaven and hell and all that sort of thing. Or where did my dog go, you know? Or what it can't just be, you know, it can't be as straightforward as what they say that it is. And I just went on living my life like usual, you know. And I got a bit older into my teenage years. My relationship to death turned into more of a morbid fascination in a way, where I was in a sense worshipping it and relating to it in such a way that it was what the world needed. And through all that, you know, it was an interesting journey, because I did spend a lot of time sort of looking at the world and how forms arise and pass and come and go. And it seemed like the way we relate to even the concept of death was fundamentally flawed to me. Like, what does the word death even mean? Is it a finality of one form, or is it a finality of all forms? Is it the passing of one form that's going to arise again? How is that death, and how does that even fit the concept of death? Is death more of an empty void, nothingness, no consciousness whatsoever? And maybe go deeper into the question. And then when I came through that, and I learnt about this thing called awakening or enlightenment, it has a completely different view of what death could be. Or even looking at the perspective of which it is looked from is completely different again. When I started to dwell upon the idea of death from the position of direct experience being the only reality, then everything changed in my relationship to it. Because it's something that's never experienced. Death is a concept in the mind. It requires past and future. In being, death itself is non-existent. It literally doesn't exist. It's something that nobody's ever experienced, something nobody ever will experience as a direct thing. Of course, we all know that all forms come and change. Nothing really ever dies. In a sense, what I feel now is that everything is both unborn, being born, and dying continuously now. And any idea of as soon as you think about death, we're automatically in the mind and the ego. It's the ego in duality, right? And I can't put any reality to that. I understand it's fun throwing concepts around, but there'll never be a kind of a conclusion to it, because both sides can always be proved right or wrong. if what people mean by death is the complete absence of anything, then that itself is what this world is being born out of. So in a sense, that is existent now. We're already there on that level of our experience, right? There's the experience of anything that can be perceived through the senses, and then there is that which cannot. Is that what people mean by death? The complete lack of any experience whatsoever? I feel it must be, because everything else is simply playing with just different ideas of what an afterlife could be, whether it's supernatural belief or anything else. This universe appeared, you know. If I'm not here to experience anything, that must be death, just a complete lack of consciousness, you know. I've had experiences like Kim was saying on DMT and stuff, where the whole universe was stripped away and yet I was. But it's not something that I could ever describe, you know. It's like consciousness itself, or awareness, doesn't require any form to be. It feels, it's like what you are essentially, outside of the person, the skin, the ideas we have of ourselves, is completely death. Just, it's alive, it's death, it's everything, you know, at the same time. It just doesn't fit in any sort of box like that. And if my identity is there and I speak from that place, then death is just non-existent. It's just not even a concept. If I put myself in the position of the ego or the person, and I see forms arising, passing, I see people coming and going, then death as a concept exists on that level, because it's in time. You know? I think most people's problem with death is the fear associated with it, you know, the unknown, because it is impossible to know. You can either go in the direction of fear or just complete embracing in the unknown, you know. I think when we go into fear, then we start to create stories of what could be and make them happy, like a heaven, a hell. People like me will be happy, people unlike me will be unhappy. You know, it's the same old story. It's the mind, the ego again. But the more I you know, feel like I accept the fact that this form, this personality will come and go, but I know that I am that deeper awareness that is both unborn, and then death just completely loses its fear, because it's the most natural process that this universe goes through, you know, every moment. And we see this on all levels, you know. We look at the body in science or things, we see that everything's constantly changing, you know. Which level are we looking at? At the subatomic level, it's what's alive, what's dead. Things that exist at different times at the same time, things that exist in different places at the same time, it loses meaning again. It seems like it's all just a big joke or something.
When I was like really young, like we're talking 3 years old right now, my grandmother was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. So yeah, it was pretty obvious that she was gonna die at some point. And my mom told me this later, that we were having this conversation one time where my sister was asking if she was gonna die, and she was quite scared about the idea of that. And I just said, well, that's okay, she's just gonna be another girl again. So apparently I had this really strong belief in reincarnation back then, even though I didn't even know of the whole concept of it. And I don't know, my vision on that kind of changed at some point. I'm not saying that reincarnation isn't possible, but I'm not really saying that it is anymore. Pretty recently, stopped having contact with my dad, and that's kind of like a decision that I was making for 5 years maybe, and eventually I came to the point where I thought that that was just the best option. And it's always kind of felt to me like I was trying to say goodbye to someone that hadn't died, and that turned out to be way more painful than saying goodbye to someone that actually had died. Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have an idea about what could be after death, like if there would be another life, but I'm not afraid of dying. I'm more afraid of living a life that people maybe put on me in some way, just do whatever everybody else seems to do, like go to school, then college, then work, and all the normal stuff, I guess. And then at some point knowing that I'm going to die, and then regretting not having done the things that I wanted to do. So that's kind of what I'm afraid of. Which is why I took the time off to go to Australia and travel and figure things out, I guess. So for the moment, that's kind of like how I feel about it.
Yeah, I grew up in a very multicultural environment. Lots of Hindus, Muslims, Christians, all of them, everybody. My family was nothing, we're atheists. And I got taught all the different concepts in school. And heaven and hell was just silly idea in my child mind. And the only thing that really made sense was reincarnation. And yeah, the more I think about it, it's also what I feel as well. Like I feel like I've been other animals before, maybe other humans, but more so other animals. Yeah, to me death isn't a scary concept, it's not an end, it's a transformation. It's yeah. Yeah, like other people have said, it's just the energy changes into something else. That's what everything is about, really. Blooming and dying, blooming and dying. Big cycle. My dad died when I was around 12. And yeah, it was pretty hard grieving at that age. But I remember when I kind of got over it in a way, it came to me in a dream, and he just smiled. He didn't say anything, he was just smiling, sitting there smiling. And I'm not sure, I may have given him a hug as well, but that was it. And it was just, okay, he's accepted his fate and he's gone to wherever, and it's good now. But yeah, I mean, death, like his body is dead, but his memory isn't dead. Like, I still think about him sometimes. I'd still like go to his grave and speak to him, or even just speak to him in my head. I don't need to be in a certain place for that. Yeah, death is it's a funny concept, and it is a concept because nobody knows it. Nobody's experienced it. It's it's interesting. I also believe that reincarnation isn't linear. I believe it can come to the future, come to the past, and can go wherever. It's not the linear timescale is just what we perceive. And potentially other animals as well. Maybe even plants.
Okay, well, I'll start with beginning, 'cause that sort of seems to make sense. I was raised in a religious family, but not one that... But they have different ideas on death than what people usually think. They don't believe in heaven or hell or anything like that. Their belief is that when you die, you're dead, you're gone, you just rot in the ground and that's it. And then at some point in the future, after, Jesus rules the earth and stuff, then you'll be recreated from God's memory of who you were. I found the idea of when you're dead to be logical, and that was something that I kind of accepted and believed. I found the idea of weird zombies, how could, wouldn't that be a different person? Like, if you're created someone from a memory, that doesn't feel to be the same person. So I found that concept a bit odd. Never really identified with that, but yeah. As I got older and started to explore different belief systems, I tended to find the reincarnation type ideas to make sense, because I had felt like there was a core self within me that was sort of outside things like personalities, and I felt like I had traits and things that came naturally to me, and sort of like knowledge that I couldn't see any source for in my life that I had. So the idea of reincarnation, that these traits and ideas and things like that could have come from something that I had been before, made sense, and I started to see, reincarnation as more of a thing. The only experience of death that I've had close to me, where I was present for it, was my childhood dog. And I felt like when he died, it was obvious. 1 minute he was my dog, and then the next he looked like a rug, basically. Whatever it was that animated him and gave him life just seemed to go, and it felt like I could feel it leave in that moment. And I'm not sure if that, I'm not really sure whether that implies there's some separation between a body and a spirit or a soul or something like that, or whether it's just that the, energetic fields surrounding him just disappeared, and that was what I felt as the change. I'm not really sure about that. I tend to look at the world as this repeating pattern that exists on all levels. So when you're looking at the atomic levels, there are these patterns that exist, and then within our cells there are these cycles and patterns that exist, and then these replicate in us as individual organisms, and then they're replicated in us as communities, and then ecosystems on the planet, and then those patterns exist in the solar systems, and then the universe probably. And within those, everything is constantly breaking down and into something new. Within your body right now, pieces of your body are being broken down and made into new pieces of your body, or being excreted as waste, which will then go off into the earth and become something else. So I guess it's hard to see where there's a beginning and an end there. And yeah. I feel feel like I've got a slightly different version of reincarnation in my head that I can't really say I believe in with confidence, but it seems to make more sense to me than the way that it's traditionally described. I have felt like there are people that I've known that feel like deeply familiar to me, and I feel like I can connect with like experiences and feel like there are people from like way back in history even, or things like that, that I can feel a connection to. And I've kind of started to look at it more like how if you have an organ, say like a heart or whatever, all those cells are in communication with each other, and each cell isn't the same cell as the others, but they are connected. And I've started to think of it more like my type of person, like my cell type, the type that the purpose that I serve on this planet, that I'm connected to other people that have the same type to me, and that we can be connected mentally and communicate with each other and share memories and experiences, and that could lead to some of the experiences that feel like reincarnation, where it feels like you have a connection to other people or to past events or past people, that, yeah, if you're of the same organ, that that you are in communication with each other in that way. I think that what we see as death, because it is something that is just a constant regeneration of energy and particles and all those things, it does seem to be very natural and not something that should bother us as much as it often can. It's a way to get rid of things once they're too broken, usually. When a cell's too old or too damaged, then that's when it gets broken down and becomes something new that can function properly again. And that there comes a point when we are too old or broken, and it makes sense to not go on and continue in that state and to become something new. And that seems like quite a positive thing, really, if you look at it that way.
So this is a topic I've thought quite extensively on. I've been touched by death a few times in my life. My first time, I guess, would have been pets. But at the time, I had two pet ducklings, and they were young babies, and they just, I don't know, conditions weren't right, and they caught some kind of disease or something. I was too young to really understand. So at that time, I remember being sad because they weren't there anymore, but not really knowing what to do about it or how to process that. I was raised in a Christian household, very Christian. We believed in all the things: God, heaven, hell, souls and stuff. I don't really know if I believed that then. But I know that the next time death touched me was with my dog, whose death was blamed on me. He ran away and got shot by a farmer for attacking some sheep. And and that really, really hurt a lot. Particularly the feeling that, you know, I had done something to cause that. So I guess that's when I started questioning the whole heaven and hell thing, because I also had been taught, you know, that heaven and hell were for humans, and, you know, animals, there was no concept of what happened to them. So I started searching for, you know, what had happened to my dog, you know, just for an answer, for some way to feel better about what had happened. That was when I was about, I think I was nearly 9. 4 years later, my auntie, who was the person I was most close to in my family, she died from cancer, melanoma, had, you know, spread throughout her entire body, and she just fell unconscious, and, you know, I was told she was on life support, and then she wasn't anymore. And I, again, had to go through that process of grieving and mourning and trying to understand what had happened. And again, questioning, well, heaven and hell, I mean, if she were going to heaven or hell, she would definitely be a person who'd go to heaven. But she wasn't religious. She didn't believe in God. She was somewhat of an atheist, and I was told in my religion that that was a reason that you go to hell. And that didn't make sense to me. So I, you know, kept on searching. At that stage in my life, I had become really, really quite depressed. And I became suicidal. So my contemplation of death wasn't just for, you know, comfort around my favourite auntie dying, but also, you know, the idea of what would happen to me when I was ready to you know, kill myself, because I was, you know, more and more coming to the conclusion that that was what was right for me. And about, I don't know, not even a month later, I attempted, I had a few times before that tried various means of killing myself. And yeah, just a month after my auntie passed away, I attempted a very serious attempt at suicide. And when I was in the hospital, I was told several times by the doctors, you know, you should have died. It's really quite amazing that you've survived from this. And so I then went on a path of questioning, why did I survive? Why didn't I die? And again, I never really got an answer. I guess I grew a little bit emotionally and spiritually, and started to feel that maybe there was something fatalistic about it. I had never been a fatalistic person. I'd never been thought about things that as if they were just meant to happen. I'd always questioned and gone, why is this happening? Why is this? Why is that? And so for, you know, many years after, I continued through that, constantly questioning why, but also, you know, starting to sort of feel like there was a purpose, I just didn't know it. When I was 20, I had my first child. And the experience for me was really amazing. When I was pregnant, I felt that I could feel not just the child growing, but I could feel its energy increasing. I could feel, and to me that felt like his soul was becoming, his life force was getting stronger. And when I was 38 weeks pregnant, I went into labour, and I knew that there was something wrong, and I felt an urgency. I mean, obviously, I was in labour, but I felt more of an urgency that something needed to be done. I wasn't willing to just sort of let the process take care of itself, which I had always thought that I wanted to. So I went to the midwife, and she did all the scans, and the baby was still alive, and but she felt that he was in trouble. She sent me off to the hospital, and along the journey to the hospital, I felt my son's energy leave me. I knew that's what it was, but I also knew that that wasn't the time to grieve, that I didn't have time for that right now. But I knew that he was gone. I felt it happen, just as I had felt his energy growing. So he was born. He was stillborn. He wasn't alive, which I already knew. And at the time, I didn't have money for a funeral, but the state requires one. So we had to enter into a payment plan, and the cheapest possible way of doing it was to cremate him. The idea of burning my son's body was a really difficult one for me. I have some kind of fundamental idea that we have all of the cells that make us up. They have so much to offer. We use them all, and they all make us who we are. And the idea of just burning that, throwing it into the fire, just felt so wrong. Over the time after this happened, I guess from then till now, so the last 9 years, I've come to an understanding that, because I'm quite a logical person, that all of our living cells are made up by the nutrients we intake, and that the energy we have is given by the sun and by the food that we eat and the water we drink and all of the things that nourish us. And that when we die, those things, like the plants and animals, you know, humans also, should return back into the soil, the soil that grows everything around us. So I, you know, have come to understand that's really fundamentally why I objected to cremating my son's body. But the question still remains, you know, where does that energy go? Where does that soul, that life force go to? And to answer that question, I guess you also have to ask, where does it come from? So in my view, it comes from, you know, the food we eat, the sun that shines on us, the water we drink, the love we share, the people, the animals that we have come into contact with. You know, it's all energy exchanging constantly. And when we die, I felt my son's energy dissipate, and it felt like it wasn't going anywhere, but out, you know, into everything, just everywhere. So I guess in a sense I do believe in reincarnation, because I do believe that, you know, your energy disperses into the things that you've touched throughout your life, and the things that you've impacted and the things that have impacted you. And that those things that receive that energy gain some of the knowledge and, you know, some of the information that you received. There's some of the experiences that you had, the memories that go with that. I also don't believe that reincarnation is a linear thing, clearly. I believe that it's like a handful of sand. If you scattered it to the wind and just watched the direction that they all fall, you can't tell where they all go. Each one lands in a different place. And I think that's the same when it comes to the energy, you know, the life force that we all have. Parts of it land in one place and parts of it land elsewhere, and, you know, you may experience some kind of past life recall of a person that you once were, but you were many, many, many people all at the same time. And all of those people have become many, many, many people when they passed on. And creatures and plants, and, you know, I feel like this energy is just dispersed amongst everything. And and those spiritual connections that we feel with past lives or past ancestors, or however you want to view it, is just a snapshot of their existence. That others have received that same energy, and that you share that connection with so many people around you. And you might just bump into someone and feel, like you've got this intense connection, like you were together in a past life. and maybe that you shared the same energy of the same being, that makes up a part of you, but you are many parts of many beings, and in the same way that your body breaks down, your cells break down, you become part of the earth again, and the earth takes your nutrients, and the plants use that nutrients to grow, and then the animals eat the plants to grow their bodies, and other animals eat those animals to grow their bodies, and that energy is constantly transformed and transmuted into something else. I think we're all part of everything, and everything is all part of us, and that's how we are all one. Because we all come from the same place, which is the same energy, which is just passed through all of us simultaneously, everywhere, everyone, all the time. So, yeah, that's
Lots of different wonderful perspectives. There's many things that people said that reminded me of my own thoughts and experiences. Yeah, my mother was cremated, and I didn't really feel strongly enough to protest that, but I didn't like it and didn't equate with it, and chose not to go to the crematorium with my family after the funeral. I feel quite strongly that I want my body to go back into the earth, and I want to give back to the earth, like literally the earth, the soil, like you were saying. It has given me everything, and that's the least I can do really, is give my body back. And it'd be very sad to have my body burned, or to have it filled with toxic chemicals before it's put in the earth, which it seems is likely going to be one of those two. I'd be much more satisfied to know that my naked body was just laid in the earth, no coffin, no clothes, and earth right on top of it. There's something beautiful and complete and about that. It couldn't make more sense. And I've always can't escape the feeling that there's so much more going on that intersects, and just like there's all these plants growing all over each other, and just like there's all these microorganisms that we can't see, and mushrooms and all of their what are they called? Mushrooms underneath the earth. There's all of these overlaying elements of life that there's overlaying dimensions. This is where language starts to fail us, of course. We start talking about dimensions or universes. But and it's all equally intermingled, and that we're actually present in different places at the same time. That where our consciousness or our awareness or our spirit or our energy is present in different places in different forms, in inconceivable places, because our brain is fully embedded in this body, in this earthly existence. There's some reason for that. Here we receive whiffs of it on the air, like a baby in the womb might hear this faint, muffled music coming from some larger dimension. And so on one level we're fully of the earth and we fully return to the earth, and then on another level where it's kind of the same process, but it's on some sort of energetic or psychic level, in which we're I guess I can only assume that it's a similar process of rising and falling and intermingling. And I've had a few strange glimpses of this. It's a few moments which pop out as having formed these thoughts, like dreams, which I believe that dreams are, what we call dreams, is actually many different phenomena, and the most commonly accepted one, which may also be the one we most commonly experience, is just kind of like psychological, like, symbolic and subconscious things going on in our mind being turned into forms. And in that sense, my mother has always been a major character in my dreams. She's a major character in my psyche and in the way I've formed myself psychically, and so she's always appearing in my dreams. But there was one specific instance after her death in which she visited me, and that felt distinctly different. Not like she was a character in my mind, but like she was truly visiting me and speaking to me. And the things she told me, it was not like some sort of major revelation, but things that kind of made sense, and to look after my family and to stay connected with my family, and simple things that I know she would have said if she was alive as well. And there's another significant dream I had about my mother, which in this dream I was going to visit her, and she was in prison. I kind of felt sorry for her that she was in prison, and I knew she was dead, but I was aware that she was dead, and I was kind of also aware that she was in prison. And I came to this big grey brick wall with a barred window in it, and I looked inside, and my mother was in there, but it was like a classroom, and she was teaching people. She looked really great. She looked so happy and fulfilled and contented and active and engaged, and she was a teacher teaching this whole class, and I had this feeling that I should just leave her to it, and she didn't need my visit, that she'd give me everything in her life. She told me multiple times that the purpose of her life was her children, and she absolutely gave all of her energy to her 5 children, and I really couldn't have hoped for a better mother. I kind of see it it's like the earth. She just gave me everything, and it even felt in her death that part of her energy came into me, and that was like her final gift to me, was to give. She was so committed that she would give me this last gift of her life energy, her life force, and that was a huge blessing. But at this time in this dream, she'd moved on, and she was living a new life, and it was not a part of me. And I spoke about this dream to a dream interpreter, and she was speaking specifically about settings and dreams, and I was told her that I went to visit my mother in prison and kind of saw death as a prison. And then she said, "Oh, but it was your dream," so totally changed that for me, and realised that I was kind of the one in prison looking out at her and her larger life. And it represented a feeling I have, which is of to some extent of being imprisoned, being limited, and sometimes I feel the pain of that. I had a similar experience after smoking DMT, in which I was kind of horrified at the world suddenly getting huge, and really couldn't deal with it. But then I kind of returned to my body, then that became I didn't want that huge world to leave. I felt really limited and restricted within my body, despite the fact that I was at a rainbow gathering. I was in a beautiful, safe, joyous place with all of the horrific things going on in the world at that moment. I still felt intensely limited and constricted in this body. See, I like the idea of death being kind of a release and a relief and a spreading out. Yeah, like I was talking about earlier with the intention and the will behind life. I can't imagine that. I think like the Buddhist idea is that human is the highest form, and that also relates to our cultural idea of like progress, and that human civilization is like the end and highest form of life on this planet. I can't accept either of those, really. Yeah, that there's a will that chooses. I kind of when we encounter somebody who we feel like we may have shared a past life with, I kind of see that outside of time, outside of this life, that we've made an agreement with that person to meet in this world, to share a purpose. Like the idea that might be a pleasant or an unpleasant encounter is as silly as saying that death is good or bad. But that we recognise each other in this world through beauty, and someone kind of appeals to us, someone shines out to us, or someone is beautiful to us, that we're drawn to them for that reason. That's how we recognise each other. I guess I base a lot of my ideas on the assumption that these glimmers, like these little moments of dream, or these moments when we encounter someone and have this feeling, even though we don't know them, those glimmers have roots that spread out into vast areas that we couldn't possibly comprehend. And yeah, that everything just spreads out, like the materialistic idea that the world is limited to what we can perceive with our senses. I couldn't possibly accept. I guess it's all formlessness that finds form. My head's starting to hurt. There's a rain in my thinking now.
I think talking about death is like a really good meditation. It makes me really calm. Like, yeah. Maybe I'm forced to be calm because I'm so scared of it. There are heaps of ideas, like from everybody, that I've thought about, and they all kind of mix together. I guess to form like an idea. So I don't really have anything to say. I think I always want to know like why. Like why the whole thing is. I agree with just the constant state of like change, not like death and rebirth. And I also agree that there are just so many like spectrums that we can't see in our life, like dimensions, and that like I guess reality is mirrored by the physical world. Like cells communing to make something bigger, just like we're communing to make something bigger, like to create an idea. And then how large does that go, and how small does it go? And what's the point of that? I don't know, I guess, is it like just to accept that, like this whole situation? Because it would be easier to accept the situation that we're in rather than questioning it all the time. Wondering about it. But it's not so easy. It's like really hard to do.
I really like conversations like this where we're not arguing, but everybody's sharing their own truth to really realise their own truth, you know. It makes me really happy. If I cut the head off this flower, does it still have life? Or does this stone alive or dead? What if it's crushed? I feel that when I'm awake in presence, the sense of I is contained in the beingness of that which is perceived, and death itself is non-existent. When I think, I move to the level of the mind, where all forms arise and pass, and death is contained in the passing of ideas of self. On the level of the mind, there's no answer, just endless questioning, you know. On the level of being death, there is no question at all. Yeah.
In regards to, like, what's the point? I think that for there to be a point, there needs to be an end state. And I don't think that there is an end state, so I don't think that there is a point as such. I think it's just what is, like, where this constantly shifting mass of energy that presents in different ways. And if you imagine something that has died, like there is that question of, like, at what point does it stop being what you saw it as, and when does it become a new thing? It's just this process that shifts gradually, and the idea of this is a person and now this is a worm or something, that's our mind's labels to things, to what we've perceived, that we've experienced sights and sounds and feelings and things that we call this person that we knew, or a dog, or whatever it is, or a flower or a stone or whatever. Like we've received some input that we have labelled as a thing, and that's kind of an illusion, because, you know, a stone is this massive particles of, like, with vast empty space between the particles swirling all together or whatever, and, you know, that's just something that from our perspective seems like a small hard thing that we call a stone. And in that sense, death is just it kind of sounds a bit meaningless, and it's just a shifting of labels from our perspective, from our minds, and that doesn't really seem to mean anything. And I think that idea of, like, the stone isn't even really a stone, it exists in us too. Like, what we see as ourselves, we're not even what is labelled as one species. We're like a planet of various different microbes and all different kinds of cells, some of which we label as belonging to us and some of which we label as belonging to a different species, but we're all basically one organism, all those small parts forming together to make a whole. And, like, where is that separation of self? If I don't know, have an excessive dose of garlic and kill off a bunch of bacteria or living in me, like, as part of me died then, or what, you know, there's that question of labels there. And between us, like, we aren't really separate beings either, the same way that, you know, if each particle in the stone had a consciousness, you know, let's assume they do, that they might perceive each other as being separate stones or something, or separate something else, but not really. And that we're, I guess, just these waves of energy that just keep, that we're just labelling in different ways. I like the idea of the bits of sand floating around, and like each thing that dies or dissolves, I suppose maybe you could call death then, like a dissolution of something. That all those pieces go into other things. That seems to fit in with what we can observe, that when things die they break down and they spread out into many other things. So it does seem to make sense that whatever substance makes up thoughts and memories and feelings and energies, that, you know, they would dissipate in a similar manner and go in many different directions. That seems to be fitting in with other things. And I quite like that idea. Not sure I have anything else to add that hasn't been said before.
One thing I've been thinking on, I guess, was the, what is the point idea. I would say, in my mind, the point is that without life there would be nothing. Without existence and consciousness to perceive that existence, there's nothing else. What would be there? Nothing. Zero. Blackness. So for there to be life, it has to be just constantly evolving. The Aboriginals have a belief that everything, every organic creature, every organic being, every plant, every little particle of sand has a soul. That everything has a spirit, and that those spirits are forever present on the earth. They don't go anywhere. They are here always. And that rings true for me. I think it feels right that is the case. Everything is living in some way or another. It like you say, everything's made up of tiny little particles. They're all bouncing off each other to make the thing that we perceive to be, a rock or a flower or a stick. We're all made up of these tiny little cells that we can't see with the naked eye, but they make a whole thing in our perception. And in that way, there is no death, because these things, all these cells are constantly breaking down and being reabsorbed or turning into something else. So yeah, it seems seems right, that it just keeps happening. It's just evolution, constant evolution. And our consciousness is just a fleeting moment in time. It's just signals made by neurons, to make various organs in our bodies work, to, prompt cells to move from here to there, or to, perform certain functions or what have you. And that life and death are really just the same thing. Just happening over and over and over again in every form that you could possibly imagine, like the various different shapes of things, different textures, different sounds, movements, feelings, everything all mixed up in this soup that we call the universe. And that death really is just a human construct. Much like, religion and economy and work, those kinds of things, that if we didn't spend our lives searching for these answers, the concept just wouldn't exist. That the other animals around us, they don't perceive things the way that we do. That there is an end to things. They just look for the next day, or they look for the next meal, or they look for the next breath. So, yeah, I think life and death are just happening simultaneously to everything all the time. And everything is everything, and everyone is everyone, and all the energies are just mixing up around constantly, and we're all a part of each other, and none of us will die because we're all a part of each other, and, every part of us will go on into something else in some way or another. So maybe what we perceive as death is really just change. And maybe that's why we grieve for change so much. Because we see it as death. Both concepts seem somewhat strange, I guess. Yeah, because we're all just beings of energy and nutrients absorbed and transmuted to cells. Changed, constantly changed into something else.
As to the question of why, within my conception of things, I feel like the purpose is some sort of trying to think about the purpose is limited by our own analogies. Like think about the purpose of incarnation as being some sort of education, some sort of learning experience. But that's not quite satisfying because of the strange way we do education. Try to think of it as some sort of play, but that's also not quite satisfying because we also have ways of making play seem not very important. And it seems like we're unable to come to satisfactory truths that are objective and I feel like there must be not necessarily true truths, but necessary truths. Like just like peeing before and then seeing my pee kind of spread all through the grass, then pour out into the it was like a river. It was just finding the lowest point and going onto the soil and then onto the dry dirt, and kind of an ant got swept up in it as well and got washed away, and how satisfying it is to pee on the earth and to shit into the earth rather than into a porcelain bowl which is then swept away through human channels and processed through human channels. It's actually extremely satisfying to be a part of the earth. And like I was saying about wanting my dead body to go back into the earth, I find it's impossible to conceive of a satisfying purpose for this life, like the purpose of the person who chooses outside of this life. There's necessary things within this life which just need to be true, like that we have to live peacefully with the earth and with the beings of the earth. And that's not really a reason to be incarnated, but it's an absolutely necessary purpose from this perspective of incarnation. And that we have to look after the earth and nurture it, and nurture the beings we share this earth with, and each other particularly, the people closest to us particularly. And this is fundamental and undeniable and beyond philosophy. And while we've kind of made clear that death is just a transformation, a process, something which is constant and inevitable and about life. It's also undeniable that we grieve, and that's something which is fundamental to us in this incarnation, and that is intensely significant as well. That we grieve the death of somebody that we love. But then that just makes me think of standing beside a natural body of water, intending to dive in and feeling the fear of that. That's kind of like a fear of death, because you know that when you hit that water you're going to completely transform. It's going to be such a different experience to be in that water than it is outside of it and dry and warm. there's a fear in that as well. And yeah, all of these things, and then pain as well. Pain is a necessary thing. Like, we need to feel the pain so we don't put our hand in the fire and destroy our hand. All of these feelings, while they're not significant philosophically, are absolutely essential to us in actually guiding our way through the world. And we have this ability to process extremely complex observations and thoughts, but when it comes down to it, we've also kind of got to fully commit to these fundamental feelings of fear, grief, and pain, and love. Love is, I guess, what causes us to nurture and respect and live peacefully, which is necessary to life. And all of these are the utmost guides, really. And that's why I feel like beauty is significant as well. Like, when we meet somebody and they're beautiful, that we need to respect and honour that as well. This is a guide as much as grief is a guide, and yeah, all of these are not a purpose outside of incarnation, but have the purpose within incarnation. And while we're here, regardless of the larger context, which, if my idea is true that we've chosen to forget into this incarnation, then we need to trust this life and our bodies and each other and the earth and all of the messages that are passing through our bodies, and trusting and submitting and letting go are necessary and appropriate.
Yeah, everyone's responses kind of made me think, like, thinking is kind of a waste of time, and like that the that whatever it is, whatever the plan is for it, whatever this thing is, well, plan, objective, it's probably going to be more successful if you just stop thinking and start doing things. It's just so interesting to think about. Yeah, like you said that there are a few like truths that become exposed in life, like learning is just definitely one of them, which is revealed like within life itself, but also through like evolutionary processes. Like from thousands of years, things have learnt, and that's just kind of been what's happening. It's just learning, and that's interesting. It's like a kind of a thing that's happening, and learning definitely comes from just doing things and being, rather than thinking about what might happen or what might be. So yeah, that trust in that is definitely a good idea.
I don't feel like I can sort of portray my view any more succinctly without repeating myself now, so I think I'm just going to hold my tongue and retreat. But this has been a really fascinating discussion. I've really enjoyed it. It's been very interesting hearing everyone's views and getting mine clear too. Yeah, thank you.
I'm still finding out what it means to be alive. I suppose I don't know what it's like to be dead at all. So you might have to interview me in about 85 years' time. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the only other thing that I have to add is that, I guess kind of like the thinking thing. It's most of the time I don't even care. It doesn't seem very relevant. Why, like when you're experiencing life, it doesn't, and when you're engaged in life, it doesn't actually seem to matter, because you have that feeling of purpose and place anyway, and it kind of all seems to become irrelevant. Like this morning I was, sitting and I was looking out, I could see the trees, it was raining, and I was sitting there playing a singing bowl so I could hear that sound all around me, and I was looking at these trees that sort of seemed to be like glowing with life, and I could feel the earth under me and the air as I took each breath, and I was, present in what I was doing, and there's no way I was questioning about death or anything like that, because it just seems so pointless when you look at what's around and all the beautiful, wonderful things that you can experience and connections you can make. It's like I just want to sink into that. And the concept of those things not being feels very pointless to think about. Because they're here. Well, like whatever we're made up of and whatever would happen in the future, or if there even is a future, if the concept of time it has any relevance at all, I know that I can put my hand out and I can feel the earth, I can feel the grass, I can breathe, I can feel the air, I can feel the people around me, and that feels like enough for me. Now I'm going to go to the toilet. My turn.
I think my thoughts echo much of what's been said. Yes, absolutely, questioning only leads to more questioning, and more questioning, and the more questioning, the less doing happens. And if there is a point at all to all of this, it's experience, it's of evolution, it's the doing, the things that are happening, you know. There doesn't really need to be a meaning to it as such, because it all has meaning in every little tiny sense, particularly to the creature it's specifically happening to, you know, whether it's a flower or a kangaroo or a person. I think it's all equally relevant to that being. You know, the wind that touches them, the creatures that touch them, the experiences that touch them, whether they be good or bad. It's relevant only to that form in that moment. And once that form dies, those experiences may or may not be relevant to whatever it becomes. And maybe that's why we feel that we have past lives, but we can't quite access the information that we receive from them, because that information isn't necessarily relevant. Maybe we didn't receive that particular, you know, whatever we're searching for from that particular past life that we're imagining to have happened, or experiencing having happened, I should say, because our experiences really are just our imagination, and how we perceive the things that are constantly evolving around us. So yeah, to sum it up, I guess, there is life after death. It's more life, and more life, and more life. And it's uncomprehendable exactly what that life will be, or where it'll go, or how we'll experience it, or if we'll experience it, because, you know, our consciousness moves on with us. If you consider that the consciousness comes from, you know, the mind, the brain, and our brain will be buried and rot away, and, you know, there is a concept that your cells, or all cells, remember their form, remember what shape they're supposed to be, which is how they are what they are, and potentially when they die they still remember that shape, and that's a concept that I'm open to. But, you know, ultimately there is no proof, there is no way of proving. All we know is what we perceive, what we learn along the way, and how we experience things and how we endeavour to experience things in the future. You know, if we're going to look ahead, do we grieve over every death? Do we need to? And I agree that, you know, pain is there for a reason, absolutely. And yeah, we need to experience pain, and that possibly we experience pain around the idea of death, because, you know, it's an inbuilt survival mechanism. You don't want to do that thing. Life must go on. But essentially, I think our society has come to view death as such a bad thing, and such a, like you say, a thing to be avoided at all costs, that we lose the significance of the whole process of what is, you know, that there is no real end to anything. And that, yeah, it's just our form changing. So yeah, I guess that's more food for thought. Yeah.
Yeah, it can seem pointless for us to think about things to such an extent that we kind of come around to the simplicity again. But I figure maybe there's also a reason why we were the ones who chose to come to this. Out of everybody here, we're the ones who chose to come to this discussion, and that we've been thinking about these things, and that our minds feel the need to work in this way. This is perhaps one of the roles that we play in the tribe, that we choose to think this way, and that we've developed the capacity to think this way. So it serves its purpose in the same way that people who've learned how to cook, that serves its purpose in the tribe. And there may not be an end point to a philosophical discussion, but it's into philosophical thoughts on our own. But again, that trust that as long as it's integrated into the tribe and into the terrestrial world, then it's plays an important part for us to follow our nature, to trust our nature as a part of nature itself. Yeah, I think I started to think of myself as a philosopher when I was living in this rural property in New Zealand and had a nice healthy lifestyle, and a friend of mine came to visit from Melbourne, and he was halfway through his masters in philosophy, and we had some good discussions, and he called me a philosopher, and I was slightly offended, and gave some very good answer about why philosophy is not really relevant in the world. And he said, "Spoken like a true philosopher." And I then went on to live with him in Melbourne for 6 months, and now I'm kind of come to terms with the fact that I'm a philosopher, and there must be some reason for this, and that maybe this energy will be channeled into something beautiful and creative and productive in the world, and which I guess is also a continuous thing. Sounds like a good place to finish.
Can I say one more thing?
Sure.
When you were saying that just then, it made me realise that I think a lot of the reason why I feel relatively comfortable with the concept of death is because I have thought about it and have come to conclusions that I'm comfortable with, and that makes sense to me, and that I can feel okay about it, and that can maybe be a difference to people who have concepts of death that they aren't comfortable with, or if they try not to think about it, so that they never reach that conclusion that they're okay with. That came to mind.
Thank you everyone for coming. lots of wonderful thoughts. Yeah.
You enjoyed it.
And maybe other people will enjoy it. Time and space. And places and times we can't even conceive of.
Maybe they're enjoying it right now.
Mm-hmm.
All the time. Everywhere.
Yeah.